Yeah, I think this is a very interesting one, and I think it's great that you have both me and Simon together talking about this because we have worked in a couple of the same companies, so it will be interesting to hear what approach. For me, it's very interesting to hear what approach you have at trying to deal with the same companies with the same culture, and in some cases with the same people.
Mm. Yeah, you've had to clean up a few of my messes, I think, Cami. But no, I think there's two things that I think we should explore. I think the first thing is whether question one, is the opportunity to do that work actually there? I think a lot of certainly younger companies, like less mature companies, newer design orgs, I hesitate to sort of say more junior teams because it's more, I think, about the maturity of the function itself. But like, there's always a tactical aspect to a design team, right? In terms of what they need to give to engineers to get stuff going out the door. And strategy can feel like quite far away. But I think the first question I'd pose is like, is the opportunity to do that type of work actually there? It's not necessarily about having the seat at the table. I think it's much more around the attitudes and the ability of the designers within that company to firstly see that opportunity and then have the toolkit to go and take it. I've seen, and I've done this myself, certainly back in the day, like I've done a lot of whining about like, oh, no one listens to me and they should listen to me, like all these ideas and like user-centered design and it's going to be brilliant. But then we've not capitalized on it. Or we've just not been bold enough in terms of putting ourselves out there and sort of sat in this nice, comfortable, practical place. So I think that's the first thing I'd throw back to you both. Like, you know, what opportunities to actually do that work have you seen that you've kind of taken advantage of, or you've just watched a team just let it go straight past them? They didn't even see that opportunity to have a strategic impact.
Do you think as well, like there's a way of creating the opportunity or like certain things that you would look out for to make sure it's there?
I think it's really hard to know until you've been in somewhere for a good period of time, because there's certainly no way you can really know before you join, because it's so much dependent on the dynamic between, you know, where does strategy come from? Where do ideas come from? How do those things come together? How data driven is it? How what's the background of the founders and how developed is that strategy? Like, how far into the future are they looking? Like, there's always lots of interesting, you know, we always love to talk about the design team superpower of like, yes, we can make this, we can prototype this thing, we can make it real, we can make something that doesn't exist feel real, get people excited about that. But I think the more fundamental side of shaping the how of a strategy is, I think, becoming more rare, and it's just can be difficult to get into those conversations from what I've seen.
There's a few things along the way that you can do to evaluate and adjust. The very first thing would be to figure out if a company you're joining is how do they feel about design? How much do they care? Because as Simon said, only until you're inside, it's very hard to know. But there are certain things that you can ask, and that I definitely haven't, but I know that I will do. I've learned my lesson, and I will do on my next role. Some things you want to ask that can give you an idea of how much this company cares for designing and for users. Are well, like what's the composition of your design team? How much have you invested? What's the engineer designer ratio? What about your research team? How much have you invested? How have they been growing? And have like, if they can show that they've been growing, how have other teams been growing? What's their growth rate? and that can give you a good idea of how much this company care for design. And then the other thing that can help you evaluate this is looking at the org chart. Where does design sit? Is design inside of one of those Russian dolls? So like, is it under product, the product under tech, and tech under something else? Like, how many levels away are you from the CEO? And I think that in a smaller company, the likelihood that you're closer to the CEO is higher than in a larger company, but also that is not an indicator that a company does care for design. So starting from a good from a good base is always going to help than starting from a company that has never worked with design. Use it as a utility. Yeah, so evaluating it before joining it, and then once you're in, I love that Simon mentioned whining, because this is like, it feels like when you're in design, especially in design leadership, that's your day. Frustrated designers because they don't get to contribute to strategy, frustrated designers because they understand a problem that is not being prioritized. But I think the one place where we all fail as designers, and one of the reasons why I decided to eventually go into doing an MBA, is where we all fall flat. Like, yes, we're excellent at showing a vision and making something that doesn't exist look real. We are super empathetic, and that's one of our superpowers, but we are not able to quantify stuff. So we're telling a business stakeholder that a problem a user has is important, but we are not able to translate it in terms that they can understand. We're not able to translate it into money. We're not able to translate it into impact. Whereas, for example, product managers, like I've seen product managers manage to prioritize things that are absolute rubbish. I was absolute nonsense, but they were able to, because they know how to use metrics. They're able to quantify the impact of something. So until designers learn how to write a business case and put something in numbers, translate it into pound signs, we're not going to ever get anything prioritized. Company's objectives. It all comes to understanding how your company makes money, and what the decision makers are losing sleep over.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think there's I think if anything, we have to work harder at pulling data science and analytics teams closer to the qualitative side, which is, often sat within design orgs, and getting much better at, understanding experimentation design and understanding the statistics behind it and some of the math stuff, which I think, can be a bit of a turn off to some designers. It's not all like the sort of squishy human side of UX research in particular, which can sometimes be really useful for solving design problems and helping us come to solutions. It doesn't necessarily solve business problems or lead to compelling commercial outcomes, and that can be tricky. I think also at the moment, just seeing so many companies, I think, almost sort of turn their back on some of those sub-disciplines within design, like UX research and content design and stuff. It's like, I found that really borderline disturbing, because I think we've not done a good enough job of quantifying the impact of those disciplines, and I think that sucks. But I think I'll go back to, I think the overall point for me is, I think the opportunity is there. I think there is a tendency for a lot of designers, whether they're ICs or managers, really being too passive, because I think we're also, we're very used to, like, here's the brief, here's some of the outcomes we would like, let's figure out how we're going to get there. When you take all of that away and you have to literally pull the brief out of someone, or it doesn't even exist, just to be credible within some of those conversations, I think you just have to have very different kind of education, really, and be, as Cami said, be able to speak that same language, and can't just purely exist in that room off the back of good product sense.
Would you give any advice to people that are working, with CEOs that don't necessarily come from a product background and necessarily like have that understanding in the first place? Because I think that can be sometimes as well what people find really tricky. I guess, it's, when a co-founder or a CEO comes from a product background already, it kind of gives them a level of understanding of design in the first place.
I'll give two things. I'll hand it over to Cammy because I'm sure you got some tips too. I think there's top two tips for me. I think number one is understanding what makes them tick, and that I'll break that down a bit more by how visual are they? Like, what is their degree of product sense? Like, what are some of the other products they love? What are they aspiring this thing that they found it to be? The more that you can understand that, the more I think you can adapt your style and the language and the way that you're communicating to be more credible and sort of get more of that face time. So I think that's really, really important. Especially if you have like a shared love of a particular company or a brand or a product or something. That's really, really powerful. And I think the second super practical tip actually is involve them at the right stage. I think if you, especially the more product-led, design-led founders who are being pulled away from that side of the work by, business things. I think most of them, if you ask them in a vulnerable moment, would say that they miss doing that work and they miss being involved and they miss being in the workshops and stuff. And actually, if you can build space to involve them early on, so they're not just signing things off, you're actually pulling out what's in their head, involving them in the creative parts of the process, and you're doing it in a way which isn't terrifying to the team, which it shouldn't be. I think design leaders have got there's so much impact there, because I think you can give the team a lot of confidence in the direction of travel if they've got someone that senior who's actually had an opportunity to take time out of their day and contribute to that. So it's like, you can make that happen. It's really powerful. It can save an awful lot of pain later on.
Yeah, and to build on what Simon just said, I think let's potentially, just to simplify, two kinds of CEOs. There would be a founder CEO, and there would be someone who is in a more mature company and is being hired externally. And for both cases, you first need to be very aware that they are busy people. I mean, these people is doing so many things, and they need to be able to absorb large amount of key information in a very short span of time. So learning how to communicate with someone who has these time constraints and being able to relay the key message of what you need to pass on for someone like that to make a decision. Then I think that if you're dealing with a founder, CEO, for them everything is going to be very personal. This company, this startup, whatever, this product is their baby, and you need to, in order to succeed, you need to be able to relate to them at a personal level. So, as Simon said, just understand what makes them tick, but also understand what are the things that you can do in order to get closer to this person, because it's all very much about personal relationships. And in the case of a CEO who has been hired externally, then really understanding like their background, their previous companies, their education, just to get an initial idea of to get an initial sense of how much they may know about what design can and cannot do. And